I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. The question is whether Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is a grifter or a player. Now, you may not know the difference between the two. Well, let me pull your coat. A grifter is somebody who recognizes how to live off of other people's money, induce them to give the money to them, and make it seem like he's doing it for a noble cause. Usually, a grifter, their mark is somebody that's probably greedy themselves, looking for something in return. And because they're looking for something in return, the grifter gets the best end of the stick. That's a grifter. And he gets big money, plays people, gets money from them. While they're trying to get from him, he's grifting them. So that's a grifter. Now, a player, well, that's something different. A player is somebody who everybody knows he's a player, or she's a player for that matter. And they specialize in pulling the wool over people's eyes. They specialize in taking innocent people who's really not looking for anything. They specialize in people who want to do good, be good, smell good, act good. They specialize in finding weak people. A player does. See, a player, he looks for weak people. A grifter, he looks for people who's looking for something, quid pro quo. But a player, well, he's looking for somebody who's weak, who doesn't really understand, and want to take him to the cleaners. So I'm trying to figure out, is Clarence Thomas a grifter or a player? I'm trying to figure out. I know that one of the sad moments of his life, I'm going to report something that's pretty sad now about Clarence Grifter, player Thomas, but he played that woman, Anita Hill. Yeah, he did. I think he's playing well, listen, I'll let you decide what you think. He's playing the American people as so-called Supreme Court justice. There was a scathing report did on him by ProPublica, that newspaper that was picked up by the major networks. MSNBC had it, CNN had it, and so I'm going to let you listen to the CNN version of the ProPublica that's been actually digging into the life of Clarence Thomas for the last year, and they found a whole lot of stink in that boy's life. So is Clarence Thomas a grifter or a player? Let's stand you there. Let's roll that clip.
Private jets, luxury vacations, a free RV, according to ProPublica. That's how Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas apparently lives his life. But it wasn't always like that. Back in 2000, about a decade into his tenure on the Supreme Court, he complained about his salary, and I mean openly, to a member of Congress, saying if lawmakers didn't act, quote, one or more justices will leave soon, unquote. Now, his salary at the time was $173,600. It's about $300,000 in today's money. Now, fast forward to 2019, and Thomas seems to have changed his tune.
Right now, what is the compensation of a justice of the Supreme Court?
Oh, goodness. I think it's plenty. My wife and I are doing fine. We don't live extravagantly, but we are fine.
Well, a few weeks after that speech, he hopped on the private jet with one of his billionaire friends and headed off to Indonesia, where he and his wife, Ginny, vacationed on that friend's 162-foot yacht. Sounds fine to me. So what happened in those 20 years that made Thomas go from nearly resigning due to his salary to now being seemingly more than just fine? Joining me now with Justin Elliott. He's a reporter at ProPublica and one of the authors of A Delicate Matter. Clarence Thomas's private complaints about money sparked fears he would resign. You know, Justin, I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us, because you're reporting that Justice Thomas told a lawmaker that Supreme Court justices should get a raise, or that he feared one or more will leave soon. That's his quote. So what happened after he raised concerns about his salary?
Yeah, well, it raised alarms. I mean, the congressman who's now retired, who I talked to, said that he left that conversation worried that Justice Thomas was the justice that was going to resign, in short order if Congress didn't raise salaries for justices. That congressman pushed to get the salaries raised. Another top official in the judiciary wrote a memo to the Chief Justice at the time of the Supreme Court and said, this seems like a crisis. What should we do about it? Interestingly, Congress never actually got its act together to give the justices a raise. But as you mentioned, this was the same period when Justice Thomas was really beginning to develop relationships with a number of very, very wealthy businessmen who started paying for various things in his life.
He paints himself, and I note, of course, that money that he was earning at the time, he said that compared to now, is about $300,000. And, he changed his tune quite significantly. He sort of paints himself now as a kind of everyman. Listen to this.
I prefer the RV parks. I prefer the Walmart parking lots to the beaches and things like that.
That boy lying, everybody.
There's something normal to me about it. I come from regular stock, and I prefer that. I prefer being around that.
Do you really?
So you hear him talking about that, and we're showing the audience at different points some of the gifts that he purportedly received, by the way, from his wealthy benefactors.
Look at this.
And some would look at this as a big contrast to the supposed everyday man. I'm not doubting that he, in fact, likes to do what he has said.
Anybody in a lifetime have 26 private jet flights, 8 helicopter. Go ahead and let it run.
He does and likes being in those places. But there's a disconnect for some, hearing the ProPublica reporting and what he's saying there. Can you help us understand that context?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so as you pointed out, I mean, as a Supreme Court justice, he makes around $300,000 a year, which, is far more than the average American, but doesn't make you super rich. But what we and others have found is that there's a small set of, wealthy, in some cases, billionaire businessmen, many of them Republican political donors, who have stepped into Justice Thomas's life and really subsidized his lifestyle, elevated it to the level of, the CEO of a company or, a rich businessman.
This is why, I asked the question whether he's a grifter or a player. So I'm probably now going to come down on the fact that Thomas is a grifter. See, a player plays on weak people who don't really have anything, and for the most part are trying to do a good deed. And, they're not looking for anything in return. A grifter, on the other hand, finds people who are looking for something and gives them the sense that they're going to get it from him because he's got the power to give it to them, and he takes them to the cleaners. For instance, Clarence Thomas is a U.S. Supreme Court justice. He's the highest court of the land. He's on that bench. He makes decisions that affect billions of dollars of industry, billions of dollars of political campaign money. This boy makes you're Supreme Court justice. I mean, people's lives are made financially, mainly not the criminal. The people that criminal cases don't go to Supreme Court justice. Nearly everything that goes to the Supreme Court is about money or abortion, but mainly the case today is about money. So here's a man who's got a case before the court that if his business does not get condemned, get a law against it, his business can make, I don't know, $80, $90 billion if the court rules in his favor. So you got somebody like Clarence Thomas on the court. Clarence Thomas say, you want a good rule? You want somebody who's going to rule on your behalf, whether the law is right or just? How about letting me ride around on your 162-foot yacht? How about letting me use your private jet to fly to wherever it is he flies to? Then you'll get a rule. That's a grifter. That's a grifter. And that's what Thomas is. So I'm going to, but let's listen to the rest of it. Maybe you'll come up with the fact he's a player. I don't know. But I think my argument's a strong argument. But anyway, let's hear the rest of what ProPublica has to say.
So what we found, he has been taken on, literally dozens of international vacations on private jets, super yachts. The Dallas businessman Harlan Crow paid around $100,000 of private school tuition for Justice Thomas's relative, who the justice was raising. In fact, the very high-end RV he talked about in that clip, which goes for, he paid around $500,000 for it in today's dollars. Turns out that money actually was loaned to him by a friend who later forgave the loan. So we've seen really, as far as we know, unprecedented pattern of wealthy businessmen subsidizing the life of a Supreme Court justice. So even though the salary was never significantly raised by Congress, he was able to attain this higher lifestyle thanks to these people that came into his life.
Now, he would suggest, of course, this is merely coincidental, that that nobody was giving him anything in return for something, judicial favor.
That's a lie.
Or a favorable ruling of any kind. He would write this off as merely coincidental and the perks of a friendship, like anybody else.
And he,
I'm sure, argues that ProPublica has just been picking on him, Justin, and that they're trying to single him out. What's your reaction to that, given, of course, there has been recently, obviously, this code of conduct now that has been issued by the Supreme Court? Not a lot of teeth behind it, I admit that. But what is your reaction to his statements that suggest this is merely coincidental and nothing that even hints at impropriety?
Yeah, well, I guess a couple things. One is that we've been talking to a lot of judges, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, and we've been struck by how just across the board ideologically, judges have told us they wouldn't even let a lawyer buy them lunch for $30, let alone take $100,000 of private school tuition or dozens of free vacations. So the reason we've been writing about Justice Thomas is we simply haven't found anything even close to like this when it comes to the other justices.
They said Samuel Alito was the and that Chief Justice Roberts somehow or another, his wife has made $10 million somehow or another. But this boy, this Thomas boy, this guy, and his wife, his wife was involved in the overthrow, the assault on the Temple of Democracy. This woman, Zooey. The two of them together, they must. I mean, my goodness. But the thing about this, if you're black, right? Got a black Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall was the first one. Thurgood Marshall was a decent person, I would think. Well, anyway. Thurgood Marshall argued and won the Brown versus Board of Education decision, desegregating all schools across America back in 1954, right? Thurgood Marshall. So the next guy comes along, this guy Clarence Thomas. So they think going to be a sort of Thurgood Marshall. This guy's iceberg slim. This guy ain't no Thurgood Marshall. Ain't nothing like Thurgood. And he's not ashamed of it either, by the way. And they've been doing it for years. If he drops his handkerchief on the floor, one of Harlan Crow's, if you will, butlers will be there to pick it up. Go ahead, Mr. Engineer. I got to get out of this story in a few minutes because I can't waste one more time on this man. Go ahead, Mr. Engineer.
Justice Thomas didn't comment for this latest story. We did talk to, I spoke to a Yale law professor who has spent time with Justice Thomas and his principal benefactor Harlan Crow is vacation with them. And that professor's view of the relationship was, look, he doesn't think that Harlan Crow is trying to influence Justice Thomas's views. He thinks that Harlan Crow is trying to keep him comfortable. He thinks his salary isn't high enough, and therefore he provides these benefits to him to sort of elevate his lifestyle. As you pointed out at the beginning of the segment, Justice Thomas's recent public comments about his salary are very, very different than what he was saying privately 20 years ago, and the salary has not changed.
All right, so you heard my opening question. Is he a grifter or a player? Which is it? And it's all around money, it ain't around. Anita Hill said that, he sexed her up, assaulted her sexually. He was the head of the EEAC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Organization, going back a few years ago. She worked for him. So what is Thomas? What do you think? I'm going to vote grifter. I think the boy's a grifter. And he's good at it. He knows, and he's getting away. And don't care that people know about it either, by the way. So, but it has besmirched the Supreme Court. I think everybody now looking at the court thinks it stinks to high heavens because of people like Clarence Thomas.